Good afternoon. My name is Martina Ruffino. I'm 14, and I'm a innovator from Fondazione Francesca Rava. So when I was younger, I remember driving past by countrysides and looking at cultivations and farms. And I remember thinking, wow, food comes directly from there. But actually, isn't that? Food and its system, it's so wide and so complicated. We could spend hours talking about it. I've always been interested in SDGs and achieving things like world hunger and, that I documented myself more about these issues. And as years pass by, many developments have been made. We have found new technologies such as AI, blockchain, smart networks, and now they're helping agriculture stakeholders to become more sustainable and self-independent. Now, they can have more wide open market access and they can lower operating costs. So we strive for innovation. We need to strive for everything that is needed to go beyond and achieve the 2030 agenda of the SDGs. Together, you and I here, we both have the same goals to achieve a better future for us and for generations to come. So I thank you for letting me be here. I thank Citizenships and everyone here. And we can make an impact in society. We've got the skills. We've done it in the past. We have the technology needed. So why not act now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Howard Shapiro, and I'm very honored to be here today. And I want to thank the organizers for offering me this opportunity to speak today. And I'm going to talk about the speed of change. And why am I talking about the speed of change? Because the keystone piece is the speed of change is faster than our response. And what I mean about this is very simply, humans and nature have worked together for a very, very long time. And when we think about how humans have impacted nature, and this week, the report from the Intergovernmental Council on the development of biodiversity, or what's going to happen to it, basically said we're in trouble. We're in terrible trouble because humans and nature lived with it at first, then we tried to tame it, then we conquered it, and later on we exploited it, and now we are changing it. And I'm an agent of change. That's the way I've always been in my science for the last 50 years. And so genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and CRISPR-Cas9 as a metaphor for gene editing is the area where I live in. And this is why the speed of change is faster than our response. We identify an issue around the world, we think through things, and we try to come up with a solution to that problem. And what we find ourselves understanding is meaningful results do not happen in the time frame which is really acceptable for society which is in a crisis mode. We don't have enough food, it's not safe, it's not nutritious, and it's not distributed well enough to be shared around the world. So the question is, what do you do? How do you fix it? Do we reward the better farmers in the world, which are already doing a good job? Or do we take the bell curve and work with government regulations and voluntary standards to move the worst farmers towards the top of the bell curve? And that is exactly what we have to think about today. Our effort must be on the bottom of that bell curve, not on the right side. But how do we move the worst to better, or average in this case? So theories of change. There's first the theory of observed change. And the reason I want to talk about this, and not the technologies which you see all around you and you hear about every day, is they're a part of a solution that's out there. But the fundamental issues are not being addressed the way they should. So the first theory is the theory of observed change. The second one is the theory of induced change, which is based on evidence and assumptions, which is really a critical thing. Higher learning opportunities, complicatedness. And the third area is the theory of conceptual change. How do we actually make these things happen? What is the reason we can do this? How are we allowed to make that? Scope, challenges for scaling up or expansion. Everyone who has a booth here today is a discoverer, a translator, and a scaler. Many fail after discovery, many fail after translation. Very few make it to scaling up. So how do we think about these things? And then the fourth part of the theory is the theory of disruptive change. And this is where we live in the world today. We live in the theory of disruptive change. We must predict what's going to happen. We must consider what's going to happen. It's triggered by internal change. So a government knows they have a problem. A society knows they have a problem. So it's not just individuals like you and me. It must be the entire food system all the way to the tops of the government. We must offer new and very specific paradigms of change, and we must drive performance. Because performance, as you'll see from the slides coming up, is what it's really about. But what if we change from a change of theory? What if we go to change of theory, not a theory of change? Meaning it's a combination of observed, induced, contextual, and disruptive. That's the future. So everyone talks about a theory of change and it's very static. But what we're talking about is non-static thinking. So I think there are 5 technologies that must be solved that are fundamental to the future of the planet. The first one is nutrition. I don't care what anyone talks about, it's nutrition. It's not calories, it's not availability, it's nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. The second word which must go along with that is safety. If food is not nutritious and it's not safe, it's not food. And I can tell you that nearly 2 quadrillion kilocalories of food are lost every year because they aren't safe. And most of the food we eat is really not nutritious if you look at the balance of macro, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, because the breeders of the world were never tasked with breeding for nutrition. They were only tasked with breeding for productivity. Stunting, it's a terrible condition. In some economies, it's 10% of the GDP is lost because of stunting. In Africa, the stunting levels are at 37%. In rural India, it's 48%. And in the country that's supposed to have a food system, the United States, it's over 7%. Number 2, not productivity, resilient productivity. Resilient productivity. Resilience means the ability to respond to a problem quickly. Sustainability, the definition that we use today, was written more than 35 years ago. Many of you weren't born 35 years ago. So a definition that's that old is likely not to be applicable today. That's why I refer to it as resilient, the ability to respond quickly. It's all the things about nutrition, it's yield. We can never forget yield because farmers won't grow stuff that doesn't have high yields. It's water and nutrient use efficient. These are critical pieces. We never think about nutrient use efficient because we have enough fertilizer in most parts of the world to just lay it on regardless of the quality. Resistance to pest and disease is more impactful today than ever before in history. And utilization of every tool we have in our toolbox for plants and animals. Waste. It's hard to think about waste. It's hard to think about losing 45 trillion gallons of water embedded in wasted food. 45 trillion, these numbers are staggering. 1.5 to 2 quadrillion kilocalories are lost. 4.5 billion people are chronically impacted every day by aflatoxin, which is a class 1 carcinogen. And then food contaminants. We don't think about food contaminants. We usually think about biological. Sometimes we think about chemical or physical. But then there's cross-contamination. And then this category of activity that we don't think about very often, which is called unknown unknowns. And I can tell you today in the world, there's contamination every day that no one has any idea where it comes from. And that is a huge problem. Renewal of degraded land. We cannot make any more land. We can only reuse the land that we've abandoned. We need to understand toxicity in the soil. We need to map the areas where it's best to grow, and we must become environmental stewardship. Number 5, social inclusion. And you almost never hear about social inclusion when you talk about food systems, but it's obviously critical. You must have good governance and solid management. You must have gender equality. We talk about it, but it doesn't happen in many places. And we must have profitability redefined by nutritional value of the crops, not hollow calories. And we must have big data. So I want to talk about 3 reports very quickly that represent some of the biggest thinking in the world on the future of food. The first was the final report from the midterm review of the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, which is 16 centers around the world, which host maybe 5,000 scientists and technicians. The most powerful group, the CGIAR. I was one of the co-authors of this report. What was number 1? Nutrition. What was number 2? Degraded land. What was number 3? Eliminate waste. What was number 4? Resilience. And what was number 5? Big data. So independent of anything else, this organization, their mandate should be these 5 things. And then we have what's called the Agriculture Performance Standard. Resilient productivity, independent of this midterm review. Profitability, environmental stewardship, good management, social inclusion. So these things are starting to go together, but we haven't taken the task. We talk about drones, and we talk about sensors, and we talk about gluten-free, but till we start to deal with these issues, we don't have it. And most of the work will not be done by governments today, but they will be done by blended finance, which is the private sector and the public sector and the scientific sector going together. The Tropical Landscape Finance Facilities have put nearly $4 billion in bonds. They've issued that much for Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Andhra Pradesh in India. This is work for rehabilitation, arc of habitat loss. It's work on inequality in supply chains. It's work on illegality and irresponsibility and reforestation. These are the kind of numbers that we have to talk about. A grant of $1 million from a foundation won't do anything when you understand the scale. This is a recent piece about a project I have in The Economist, improving the plants that Africans eat and breeders neglect. And this is what we've done so far since I began this in 2011. 80 students have graduated from our plant breeding academy, and when I call them students, they all have PhDs, and they have major jobs in agriculture sector in Africa. Of the 101 crops we're working on, we've sequenced the genomes of 57, and through external funding, we've raised $11.6 million. But this is the kind of collaboration it takes. It's not one person with somebody else doing it in their backyard. It takes this cacophony of partnership to really pull off this kind of change. And what are we trying to do? Change the fundamental food system, the foods that are eaten every day in Africa. We want to change them and make them more nutritious and safe. And in 2017, because aflatoxin is one of the biggest problems we have in the world, impacting 4.5 billion people, we have no way to fix the aflatoxin problem. If we get clean material out of the fields, the real problem is, how do we deal in storage? Synthetic biology. So we're creating enzymes that have never existed in nature in order to do this. It's online. It's called the Folded Aflatoxin Puzzle. It's a game you can play. We have 80,000 hours of gamers' time already. More than 1.6 million designs of new enzymes that never existed have been produced. 35 of them look like they will detoxify aflatoxin. And this is what it looks like when you play the game. And the game is not played by scientists, it's played by truck drivers and housewives and retired people. But what we're doing is we're altering proteins to create new enzymes in order to detoxify aflatoxin. And when we talk about change, I would like to let you understand one critical thing. What we have done in the last 10,000 years is so dramatic and so radical. Imagine that teosinte is the predecessor of the maize crop. In between, you see a hybrid, and at the final, you see modern corn. But it's one of the most complicated products to grow as a crop because of the nitrogen use. But this is what we can see now. We can see a kernel of corn. That's how we used to think about things. We can look down farther to see a single-cell endosperm, which we never could see 45 years ago. We now can see a chromosome with the basis of what happened through genomics and metagenomics. We can see histones, which are the backbone, and now we can see DNA. That's how much I can understand about a single crop since I began 50 years ago. So last August, we published a paper providing the initial proof that maize can make its own nitrogen, which would be a huge breakthrough. So it's only a proof, it's not a product, it's a discovery. So now it has to be translated and scaled, which is why that chart of speed of change is faster than our response is so important. And in closing, I'd like you to take away this theory. No matter how many experts you line up, you cannot vote nonsense into truth. And the reason I say this, there's so many discussions about agriculture and agricultural technology that impact us. Much of it is not about the truth. Thank you very much.
All right. Everybody hear me okay? Thanks to Howard. I had the pleasure of working with Howard in a past life, and he is definitely the real deal. He doesn't just look the part. He is really that smart. So I'm Brian Crowley. I'm CEO of Soylent. I'm really excited to be here with you guys, especially as you walk around these halls. So many great thinkers, so I'm really honored to be here, kind of telling you a little bit about a vision of the future of food from maybe Soylent's perspective, and hopefully giving you a few different things to think about and learn about. But let me start with kind of this idea of the future of food. Many have tried to define it. So you have educators, farmers, scientists, and Hollywood.
What is the secret of Soylent Green? New York City in the year 2022. Nothing runs anymore. Nothing works, but the people are the same. And the people will do anything to get what they need.
This is the police.
What they need most is Soylent Green.
The supply of Soylent Green has been exhausted. Return to your home.
What is the secret of Soylent Green?
All right, how many people have seen that movie or read the book? All right, don't give away any secrets because we're going to get back to what the secret of Soylent Green is. But really, sometimes science fiction, certainly dystopian science fiction, is really pure fantasy, but sometimes it actually predicts things pretty accurately. And certainly in the case of global population, that's one of them. So you guys are seeing this up on the boards, and speakers talk about these, so I go through these really quickly for this crowd. For some crowds, people are really still getting educated about what we're up against from a sustainability standpoint. So again, 9.7, 10 billion by 2050, depending on what study you look at. We got to increase food production with the current technology by 70%. We've got 40 to 50% of root crops that are wasted. We have a growing obesity epidemic, and really, surprisingly, animal protein continues to grow. So the consumption of animal protein continues to grow. So there's some pretty scary stats, and as we come together in this place at Seeds and Chips, it's even more relevant that we're tackling all of these challenges, but we definitely have to do something about it. So, but let's begin with what role food plays in the world. I mean, at its core level, it's the fuel of life, right? It provides sustenance. It provides pleasure, right? Food is pleasureful. It brings families, right, friends together. It defines cultures and regions of the world. I mean, food is truly integral to human beings. Food is entertainment. Many markets in the country, some of the top network shows are actually chef and food shows. So food is entertainment. I actually started my career in big food and beverage before I kind of found my calling in this crazy entrepreneurial space. And really, after nearly 20 years in the food and beverage industry, I kind of really realized that, you know, we're kind of at a crossroads, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I was approached by a different kind of food company, and it really changed my perspective on so many levels. So let's start with the Soylent story, for those of you who don't know Soylent. So the guy on the right there is Rob Reinhart. He's the original founder of Soylent. He was interviewed by Neil deGrasse Tyson a couple of years ago, if you had the opportunity to see that. So he was an engineer in Silicon Valley, and he was working ungodly hours, and he really got this idea to create a sustainable food replacement that allowed him to refuel without going to the grocery store, without spending the time and effort needed in the current food system. So he thought about it completely differently. He actually taught himself food science. He partnered with some experts, and then he created a powder that you mix with water. He lived on it for 30 days. He blogged about it, and it went viral. And now I'm up here on stage talking to you guys. So it is really crazy, and especially in this space, how really taking an idea and really thinking through it, and then knowing that, you know, an entrepreneur like Rob and his co-founders were able to take an idea and make it a reality. So he had a real vision for the company. Most people don't realize that Soylent was really founded on a sustainability vision, hence the name, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it was really all about creating products that could sustain you, that were super efficient, engineered to give you everything that your body needs to thrive, using plant and cellular to do that. So here's where it gets a little bit, he really knew and understood the power of social media and blogging, and he and his co-founders picked this name, Soylent, right? And you know, this was actually not the movie that I just saw you a clip. It was actually a book called Make Room by Harry Harrison.
To me, Hatcher, you gotta tell him.
Oh, I think we lost the audio. That was the secret. So for those of you who don't know, in the movie, Harry Harrison, the Soylent was actually a luxury of soy and lentil that was only available on the black market and through government, and because there wasn't enough protein, there wasn't enough food sources. In the movie, they actually did Soylent, and when they did Soylent Green, there's people in it. So that's the secret of Soylent Green. So again, this innovator creates this company, calls it Soylent, really to remind us, right, that this is a really important part and a challenge that we face in the future. So this is Soylent now. We've kind of moved from a meal replacement powder to a complete nutrition platform you can enjoy throughout the day. And really the company has done well, right? We've raised $72 million, backed by Andreessen Horowitz, Google Ventures, the production board. So that brings me kind of to the future of food. So, this is this crossroads that I talked about. So you got this, really, as I look at it, and pardon the simplistic view of this, but you got the look to the past, right? Farm to table, paleo, that idea. And then the future, science, technology, innovation, cellular. So how do we think about this? So we know this story, hunting and gathering, then we moved into communities, we have more access to fresh foods. Obviously, we have Whole Foods, Carrefour here, other supermarkets, especially in the developed world where you can get food. And now a whole generation actually is delineating between the different organic and those types of options that are out there. But we know that organic farming produces 25% less per acre, right? And with current technology, it can't sustain this population growth that we talked about. So while science provided stronger, more robust farming, some of it was rejected through the non-GMO movement and other issues that have been brought up and talked about and debated. But there is another way, right? Beyond Meat, congratulations to Ethan and the Beyond Meat team, another Southern California company, for their IPO. It's really a step forward for us. We think it's time to change the conversation, invest in more cellular, really try to figure out how can we actually create a more sustainable food source for the future. Just has done some great stuff. DNA, like we want basically a vending machine where you can put in your diet and a Soylent drink will spit out that actually is customized for you. We're working with some of the leading companies in this area, and we're hoping one day we'll have a Soylent product where most of what's in there is actually from cellular sources. So the future of food, is it just the past or is it just about the future? That's been the debate. Well, I think it's really about both, right? The Tesla model can work here, right? We sell luxury cars to rich people so that we can offer the Model 3 and change the way people drive. That can happen in food as well. So as you think about it, right, how do we put these two things together and work? There's going to be some people in this room and that are showing that are going to create some amazing organic options. But there's also going to be lead innovators that are pushing the envelope with science and technology to help solve these global food ecosystem issues for us. And I think they can actually work together. If we do this, right, we can avoid that. Let's all agree we definitely want to avoid that. We don't want Charlton Heston yelling at us about what's in our products. But that's really what I would leave you with, is how do we actually create a global food ecosystem that can sustain and that uses both past and future to take us into the future of food. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eli Englard. I'm the CEO and founder of Trellis. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, and specifically about how AI can bring new level of efficiencies to our food systems. So, our food systems suffer from massive amount of inefficiencies. The supply chain that's responsible for taking a piece of land and transforming it through farming, manufacturing facilities, retailers, and then downstream to consumer, suffering from massive inefficiencies that result in lower quality, higher cost, and tremendous impact on our environment. And we looked at multiple food systems and food supply chains, and we asked ourselves, where is this inefficiency coming from? This inefficiency is causing more than $1 trillion of lost profit globally every year. And after analyzing different types of supply chains in multiple industries, we found out that there is something common to all these supply chains. There is this fundamental tension where agriculture production meets industrial food production. Let me explain this tension. While agriculture output fluctuates all the time, due to weather, soil, farming practices. Food production requires consistent rate production with very high standards of quality and specific cost. And this is this built-in tension that we think causing this fundamental inefficiency in our food systems. And this problem is what we call the biologically dynamic supply chain. So managing supply chain is a very complex role. It's true to every supply chain, but it's mostly true to the food supply chain. You have business and operational processes like forecasting supply and demand, managing manufacturing, transportation, trucking, signing contracts with growers, with suppliers. And all these business and operational processes rely on very high level of uncertainty because quality, quantity, timing, and cost fluctuate all the time. Imagine that you're running a potato chips factory. So you have machines, you have assets. When this factory isn't working, you're losing money. So you buy more than you need, okay? If you have poor quality, then you pay the price. And essentially, everybody pays the price, including the consumers. This problem of uncertainty and the inefficiency of the supply chain is just going to grow, and there are two main reasons for that. Number one is climate change. This is a graph that shows how the decisions that we make today are going to impact the future of global warming. It depends on us, depends on the politicians as well, but the fact is that climate change is here, and we have to develop strategies to address that. The current strategy in place is to take the first bullet. So companies, growers take the first bullet and try to accommodate in the next year. But with climate change, the second bullet is not like the first bullet. And with AI, we can shorten the learning cycle from years to weeks and months, and AI is going to help us address climate change. The second aspect that will increase uncertainty is consolidation, and we see consolidation across the board. Farm size doubled in the second half of the 20th century, and the bigger the system is, the bigger the food system is, every piece of uncertainty and risk compounds itself and becomes bigger and bigger waste. So as businesses grow, and we saw also consolidation in food businesses, companies will have to adopt AI in order to shorten the learning cycle. So we embarked on a mission to predict and control the fluctuations across the food supply chain. And we do that by teaching computers to understand the patterns that impact the efficiency in the supply chain and to push this information to all the stakeholders to allow them to make much more better decisions, allow them with better risk hedging, allow with better planning across the board from field to production to product. How does it work? So we've built a core AI engine to integrate data from field to product. We integrate market data, business data, manufacturing data, supply chain data, and field-level data. Just integrating the data has enormous challenges for many reasons that I cannot describe right now. But this is the core AI engine. And the role is to identify the patterns and to be able to predict fluctuations in quality, quantity, timing, and cost. And then we feed the output of these algorithms to specific optimization algorithms to solve or to help empower these business and operational processes of farmers, food producers. We're pushing a paradigm shift in agri-tech and in food tech. And this paradigm shift is from moving from tracking and monitoring in real time to predicting and optimizing the system. This is a very, very important paradigm shift. The second one is moving from hardware and collecting more and more data to AI that can transform this data to value. This is how our algorithms look like. There are challenges of integrating data and transforming it to insights. The biggest challenges in supply chain data is of reaching false correlations. And very easy to explain it by thinking about an agronomy manager that's been in the business for 20 years. And he knows really well his job. How many harvests have he seen? 20. He has 20 data points to build the intuition to manage this supply chain. So this challenge is also true to AI. So we have to build custom algorithms to learn across geographies, across varieties, and across pieces of land, and compute thousands of correlations in real time to reach those real conclusions and predictions that are true. The challenge is not only to come up with very complex technology and to predict the future. It's about pushing this technology to all the different stakeholders across the food supply chain and allow them to make more informed decisions. So we have to be able to have a even though it's a very complex back end, we need to have a very simple front end to surface these trade-offs between timing and cost and quality and quantity and drive business efficiency. So our vision is to bring this intelligence to everyone across the food supply chain, and essentially to allow everyone to do a better job at balancing supply and demand. We started working in the wine industry, in the potato chips industry. In the potato chips industry, for example, last year was a disaster. 2018, yields were 25–30% below average because of severe drought in Europe. We are all paying the price, okay? Potato chips bags are cost increased by up to 25%, and we're also buying smaller bags. Another year like this, and people will be out of business, okay? So our platform is helping farmers, potato growers, as well as potato chip, French fry manufacturers to optimize their supply chain, make better decisions. We started recently in coffee and vegetable industries, and we plan to cover 50 ag food verticals in the next 5 years. The goal is to use this technology to optimize, to reduce uncertainty and reclaim 80% of that lost $1 trillion and dramatically reduce the fluctuations, bring efficiency across the board. Thank you very much. If you want to learn more, go to trellis.ai, and you're welcome to visit us in our booth at C33. Thank you.
Good day, everybody. I'm Angelina Charia. In case you didn't realize, the accent is Australian. So I'm going to take the next 10 minutes of your time and talk to you and share with you an Australian perspective in terms of how we are solving the future challenges in the world of food innovation. So I really love this quote. It's what got us here is not going to get us there. It's not mine, but I've tried to adopt it over the last 5.5 years to help us really guide as a beacon in terms of what we're trying to do in here. And maybe before I get into the substance of my presentation, I actually wanted to share with you a food innovation ecosystem that we've set up in Australia. And it started about 5.5 years ago, basically as an investment by Mondelez International and the Victorian State Government, two organizations that actually had a vision, and the vision was around how do you support and create a brighter future in the food system going forward. So from an Australian perspective, and yes, we are very far, it took me 24 hours to fly here, but it's really about how do we start to, one, have a voice at a global level, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity today, and secondly, to actually showcase the capabilities. And Australia being where we are also the gateway to Asia. The largest middle-class population will sit in Asia by 2050, and that's where the opportunity is. So what did we do? Another quote. We thought really big, and I think this week we heard about dreaming big, and that's exactly what we did. We started small, and we moved really fast. We effectively set up an ecosystem where you could have small and medium enterprises, startups, large multinationals, researchers, and government come together to actually create and identify opportunities to solve together. And that timeline you can see in 3 years, what we did with the model was start to put together an ecosystem that actually came together and collaborated, and outcomes resulted in deep research, which was around export pathways into Asia. It was around looking at how do we attract the brightest talent into the food sector and make food sexy again, as I say. And then the other thing was to identify opportunities for collaboration, but also co-creation as well. And I think, without any doubt, as we all sit here together and being in this space, we know that there are many, many challenges that we all face, our planet faces. At the end of the day, we need new thinking and we need new tools. And my fellow speakers today are sharing with you a number of technologies in terms of how they're looking at solving for this. And we can't sit here because I think what we are in is a crisis. And what better way to galvanize and motivate us all when we have a crisis as a world to work together to solve some of the big challenges that we're hearing. So how do we do that? And I guess our learning is around, we hear lots about collaboration, but it's about co-creation. We must work together to solve. All the actors in the supply value chain need to come together to do that. And I guess the opportunity for all of us this week is exactly that, to try and do this. I think this has been probably one of the guiding principles that has really helped us. In particular, when I sit now at Monash University, it's about connecting industry, academia, and research together to really solve for that, rather than the old adage of going from research and then trying to find pathways to commercialization. We all know how fast or slow that goes as well. So one approach that I'm going to share with you today is around taking a foresight-led approach. So I've spent 20 years in fast-moving consumer goods businesses like Mars, Fonterra, Yum Brands, Mondelez International. And lots of businesses like those and other businesses use a lot of insight, which is fabulous. You must understand your market, your consumer, where you're going. Very few businesses we've found actually take a foresight-led approach. And by that I mean is really taking a deep dive. And there are no silver magic bullets. There are no, crystal balls to tell you this, but using scenario planning to actually take an approach. And this is something that we did last year, which was effectively looking at the 5 big mega trends globally in 5 years that start to impact the global consumer and the market. And that's where we always start from. Doesn't matter what your research and your technology is, it must actually add value. At the end of the day, the consumer is the person who actually converts that, right? So, and I'm sure it doesn't matter what city you live in, we are seeing this in Melbourne. So an example I'll give you is new urbanism with high density growth. We are now building apartments in Melbourne without kitchens. I'm a foodie, and you kind of go, how does that work, right? And then the other thing that we've done is actually identified from a science and a research perspective the 5 big areas that will make the biggest impact: mind and mood, looking at bio-bespoke or performance optimization or clean living, where you're looking for alternatives to start to actually have a look at where we solve the future. So one of the things around innovation that really doesn't work, and you may or may not know this, but in fast-moving consumer goods, 90% of products fail on shelf after the first 12 months of launch. Every company out there wants to go faster and wants to have more stickability on shelf. And effectively, it's taking a design-led approach where you sprint away to understand from opportunity through to the consumer. But along that journey of creating new products, what you want to do is eliminate your failure points or de-risk so you have more stickability. So whether you're doing research and you're converting that into products, this is really important as an approach to try and consider. I'm sharing this map with you, right? So I've experienced the subway while I've been here, and effectively what we've done is identified capabilities. And in here you can see that, there's network partners who can connect you from idea to commercialization. You have got deep technology research happening, anything from big data all the way through agtech. You've got research from the areas of sports science through food security. Education, making sure we're bringing the future talent and educating them around food, as well as with food and agribusiness connecting together. And then starting a conversation or a forum that starts to give you an opportunity to talk about food thought leadership and innovation, and how do we actually co-create and collaborate together. So I know it's a really large map, but effectively, hopefully it gives you an insight into what the capabilities are. And I guess the question probably in your mind sitting there is going, well, so what, Ange? So what, now what? And I think the proof's in the pudding. And if I put this slide up, this is the impact we've had in the last 5.5 years as an ecosystem in Australia trying to make a dent in the food and agribusiness sector. You can see some of the brands, which you may or may not know. There's some global brands, there's some local brands, but effectively, it's not just about companies coming to us and we become your R&D partner and connecting you and helping you co-create. It's also about nurturing those startups all the way through that journey, knowing that 94% of startups fail in their very early years. But it's also connecting industry and deep research together so that you can find that point of difference which allows you to stick longer on shelf if that's what your end game is. And lastly, it is about creating a culture around collaborative innovation. You can have innovation processes, you can have deep research, great technology, you can try and marry it together, but it's the culture that allows you to try and bring it all together. And part of that is people. At the end of the day, it's human to human, right? So it doesn't matter where we are in the world, where we come from, and I think it's the shared vision that starts to galvanize us. So in conclusion, I guess, my call to action to you as an audience, one, thank you very much for listening to me, but secondly, what I would love to do is actually come and co-create with you. I would love to be able to work together on projects and initiatives that are bigger than just Australia. And I think my other encouragement is an invite to you as an audience to come out to Australia in September, because Seeds and Chips are coming there. What better way to come and actually hear and see and experience all of this? And you all have an invite to Monash University if you so desire. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Under 30.
So hi everyone, thank you for being here today. My name is Mark. I'm one of the co-founder and one of the beekeeper at Nectar. And at Nectar, we like to say that we give honeybees a voice. So yes, I'm here to tell you about beekeeping and technology and the future of pollination. So as most of you probably know, honeybees are dying. Every year, we lose about 35 to 40% of our bees because of pesticides, parasites, diseases, and climate change, and the list goes on. And everybody in the room should care, since about a third of the food that we grow depends on honeybee pollination. So the industry responsible taking care of our food system for this third of our food is the beekeeping industry. It is a worldwide $15 billion industry that, yes, produces honey, but mainly really provides us with pollination services with 100 million hives throughout the world. When I'm talking about pollination, I'm talking about crops such as almond and canola and apples and blueberries and cranberries, all crops that really fully depend on honeybees to be able to produce yield at the end. So the way that pollination works is you have beekeepers trucking around hives to different yards. This case is with the almond industry in California, and the beekeepers are going to let their hives being there. The bees are going to go around pollinate flowers, and then their beekeepers are going to truck the hives out of there. Unfortunately, this is the reality of commercial beekeeping. So just to assess a hive status in terms of health, the beekeeper has to physically go to every single one of their hives and open them up to look inside and then react depending on the issues. And if you take this and you scale this to, let's say, 100 beehives, or 1,000 beehives, or 50,000 beehives, like some beekeepers have in North America, this quickly becomes overwhelming, and you can totally get why most of the times beekeeper will lose about 35 to 40% of their hives because of this method of management and all the issues that they're currently facing. And the situation where this is leading is something like this. This is the almonds in California. So there is demand for almonds currently, but the issue is that almonds require currently 2 hives per acre for proper pollination. And in the future, the almond demand is increasing, so the almond-bearing acres are also increasing, but the bee population will not be able to sustain this demand. This is 2023. We're not talking in 100 years from now. This is right now. This is tomorrow. So we need to do something about this. So yeah, the current problem, we have beekeepers that are overwhelmed by different factors to really be efficient at taking care of their hives, and we have growers that don't really have standards or metrics in terms of pollination to embed their practices to make sure that the bees are staying healthy. So I'm going to tell you more about the work that we do at Nectar. And at Nectar, our mission is to help the commercial beekeeping industry make sure that they're keeping thriving honeybees to ensure our food security, and we do that through technology. So what we offer Beekeeper is fairly simple. It's an apiary management platform that uses sensors and AI to monitor the status of bees and advise beekeepers on the best course of actions to keep them healthy. So our solution provides proactive management for the beekeepers by being able to remotely assess and keep track of what's going on to better manage their teams and make sure they're treating their hives at the same time. And for the growers, we're providing them transparency and optimization of their pollination supply chain to make sure that they're getting the best out of the bees that they're renting. So in terms of technology, what we have is an in-hive sensors that's capturing different data points from the bees. So temperature, humidity, sound frequency, so basically the signal that the bees are sending each other, weight and geolocation. And using this, we're able to, yes, extract data, but honestly, commercial beekeepers don't really care about the raw data. What they want to know is, how's my queen bee is going? Is my population increasing? Is there parasites or diseases? So that's what we provide at Nectar. All of this through a hardware infrastructure system that is scalable for commercial beekeepers in providing them analytics on a web platform. So a good example of what we're providing them right now is queen status. So we're looking at how the queen is laying pheromones throughout the hive to induce the queen bee the bee workers into thermoregulating the hive and keeping a very steady temperature. So that's the orange line, the blue line, sorry. So when the queen bee is getting sick or getting too old or simply died, she's going to stop laying pheromones, and the workers are going to recognize that, and they're going to break thermoregulation. So here you see the 36 degrees Celsius when the when the queen bee dies, basically stops, and then when the queen is reintroduced within the hive by the beekeeper, then the thermoregulation starts again, which is stuff that as a beekeeper you usually have to go on site to witness, and we're able to provide this remotely. Together, we've done 6 iterations of our technology with commercial beekeepers in Canada. So this is us installing devices at a research lab in Quebec, going through different iterations of our hardware to make sure that we're capturing the right data with the bees and making sure that this is non-invasive and a positive addition to the hive. Just a little snap of our daily life at Nectar. This is us installing during installation and then enjoy poutine post-installation. So if you ever come to Canada, we'll welcome you and of course offer you poutine. That's our specialty. And we're currently getting pretty good traction. So these are the market that we're targeting. But pretty recently, what we're seeing as well is that some smallholders farm are starting to beekeep as well to be able to have different sources of revenues. It's something complementary to the main crops that they're growing. So we're looking to help them with our technology as well to make sure that they're taking care of their bees and doing a good job. But most of our work currently is in North America, and we're just about, we're launching in 3 weeks our commercial product to connect thousands of hives across North America and working with some of the biggest, most influential commercial pollinators across North America. For them, what it means is to be able to reduce operating costs and augment their productivity and really keep more hives alive. What we've been able to do so far is going from 35% losses to 30%, and our goal is to go down all the way down to 10-15%, which should be the normal for honeybees across the world. And what we're seeing is also, if we can bring value to commercial beekeepers through our technology, how can we help the growers? How can we help the growers that do depend on them for pollination? How can we make sure that this supply chain is truly transparent and optimized to make sure that we're securing the $200 billion worth of food depending on honeybees by working from both sides? So the team bringing you this, and of course this is us at the office every day, is led by my 2 amazing co-founders. So Xavier, who's an electrical engineer that used to work in a big power management at Hydro-Quebec, and then Heaven, who is a honeybee researcher that then worked at NASA implementing AI to predict drought in North Carolina, and myself as a beekeeper and an industrial designer. We're backed by amazing partners, so from the Canadian government to private sector. Of course, we have our own bees, so about 500,000 bees that most of the time just, their fun is stinging us. But what we believe is that initiatives like ours and many others that we can see across the food chain, the real goal is to increase honeybee survival rate and making sure beekeepers are being productive doing so, in ensuring efficient pollination services to secure our food bank. And what this means for us is keep having access to the food that we're currently having access now. So either you're getting involved into planting honey producing or nectar producing or pollen producing flowers in your yard, or really actively being engaged in changing agricultural practices. We do believe that everybody has a word into this, and together we can bring and give honeybees a voice. Thank you.
Under 30.
Hello, everybody. So I'm here to present you Ambrosus. Ambrosus is a company that is concerned about bringing trust to products. We specialize in food and pharmaceutical products, but today I will focus, of course, on the food and agricultural products. So what are the problems we're looking at? So we're looking at the supply chain and the issues that companies and stakeholders are facing related to the lack of data about the origin of the product, whether the product itself is authentic, or what the conditions of storage have been. And it's all related to the fact that there is basically a black box of data, in the sense that there are different stakeholders within the supply chain who may not necessarily share full information with each other, who may not have adequate or reliable data. And the basic question is, how do we assure data integrity? How can we provide quality data about food and supply chains? And we are using blockchain technologies coupled with IoT to make sure that we can provide a full history of the product's life cycle and its quality. So on our side, we combine these core technologies, and we built basically open source solutions, code, SDKs, tools for entrepreneurs to use our technology to build individualized solutions for individual products. So I'll skip through the technical slides and go straight into the practicalities. So how do we actually integrate into supply chains? If you look at the supply chain of a typical agricultural product, there are several stages, and each of those stages has its unique challenges. A lot of them are related to the lack of transparency about, let's say, the origins of the raw materials or the conditions of storage of the product at the distribution stage. So you select a particular part of the supply chain, and using our tools and using our open source blockchain, you can actually improve the visibility of data, and you can also add additional inputs about the quality of the product, such as what is the temperature of storage, who is the owner of a product at a particular time, or any other relevant information. And then all this data is collated in one single platform, which allows different stakeholders, from manufacturers through to distributors, through to shops, through to the end consumers, to verify reliably the authenticity and quality of the products. In terms of how we achieve it, so we actually use secure protocols to exchange data, and we importantly connect the physical element, which can be a sensor or a tag, on the packaging of the product, and then we link it to the data that is immutably stored on the blockchain. I'll give you some more practical examples. So here is the example of an RFID tag that can be placed on a consumer product, and you basically, the tag becomes the identifier, and you use the tag to actually track the information, location, and any other parameters for the product, and you have a dashboard, in this case on a mobile phone or on your PC, on which you can see full information about the product. And the type of information that the consumer receives can also be tailored. So individual companies can select what matters to them or to their consumers and allow them to verify it on their screen. We have also built use cases for the meat industry, for instance, whereby we worked with a couple of partners to assure the origin of beef. And importantly, at that stage, the life cycle of the cow itself was also recorded, in the sense of how many miles has the cow walked during the lifetime. So if we're talking about people who want to get quality food, they're concerned about free range, they're concerned about the quality of product they're getting, and as much information as we can get into that. So we've split the whole process into multiple stages, and we have identified the spots where we can basically record the relevant information and supply it to customers, especially those who are either food conscious or maybe they're ready to pay higher amounts of money for quality food, the one where they can actually check it. And what's important is that here we really change the way that the perception about the quality is built. It's no longer around advertisement or marketing. It's rather actual data that anybody can verify at any time. And this data cannot be changed or deleted because it's using blockchain, which provides data immutability. So you have such a dashboard which intermediary stakeholders can use to verify, what the farm is, where the product came from, and farmers can also interact with the consumer by maybe providing the story of their farm, providing maybe some even pictures to really create a connection between the consumer and their food. And this is an emerging trend across many different regions. We have also made a use case on vanilla, which is one of the most precious agricultural commodities in the world, whereby we tracked the bundles of vanilla from Madagascar to Western Europe, France and Switzerland, and there we made sure that A, that's the real vanilla, the one that originally left the point of origin, and B, we also tracked the humidity conditions to make sure that vanilla is properly dried. We actually have a booth here as well, and we do have those bundles of vanilla where we can show to people and explain how it works. There is also a documentary available online which can show you, it's a beautiful documentary made in Madagascar, which actually shows you how at the practical level we apply our technologies, even in those regions where technology access and connectivity is highly limited. Closer to where we are right now, Italy, so we've done a use case on olive oil and specifically on also on traceability and quality assurance. So there we used a couple of also hardware techniques to combine with our blockchain, where one is basically a smart box, and the smart element of that box is very simple actually. It has, it's the one you have on the top left corner of the slide, where you have the box and it has a lead. The moment you lift the lead, the box simply sends the signal to the blockchain that I've been opened, so don't trust the content anymore. The olives might have been replaced and so on. And then similar checks for quality can also be done at the level of bottling of olive oil. And olive oil is the industry that has a lot of problems. It has a lot of counterfeiting, adulteration, and other problems. It's one of the most counterfeited agricultural commodities. And from that perspective, we have designed kind of a clever combination of using the immutability of data provided by blockchain and the hardware solutions that can solve problems for different stakeholders. We've also made similar use cases for coffee. In that particular case, the main focus was actually sustainability, because you can also use blockchain to prove the sustainability of your product, and arguably sustainability is now also a dominant parameter in determining the quality of the product. It's not only the taste of the product or the cost, but people are also concerned about the environmental impact or the fair wages that the farmers can receive for their products. And from that perspective, you can also use our platform to specifically record sustainability-related data. And Ambrosus is a partner already of the United Nations 10YFP. It's the Secretariat of the UN that's working on implementation of sustainable development goals across different regions with specific mandate to improve the livelihood of people worldwide. And we work on the Sustainable Food Systems program, so where we really drive innovation in the food sector. And other parameters can also include the amount of CO2, for instance, that can be emitted through transportation of the product. So we're trying to see how we can make supply chains of products more sustainable and to really allow the consumer to be able to verify it in a fully transparent manner. So these are some of the use cases really that demonstrate to you how for the agricultural sector specifically, the solutions such as the ones we built can be applied. To go slightly into the technicalities, so many people talk about blockchain these days, and there is definitely a lot of activities across all sectors going on. In our case, we have also focused to make our blockchain specifically focused on scalable solutions, because if we're talking about supply chains and global trade, we're talking about billions of products moving around every day. There can be billions or even trillions of readings from sensors. If you're talking about temperature measurement, location, ownership, humidity, pressure, any parameter, you need a scalable solution to really process that data. So we have created some unique model. I won't have time to go too much into this. I'll be, of course, more than happy to explain it to any interested people at our booth. But our specific concern is to be able to process a large volume of data, but also, importantly, from the physical objects. So we're really focused on connecting the digital to the physical. And this is the main area where our company is building solutions, and agricultural supply chain is the primary area where these innovations can really bring value. So thanks very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to talk to anybody at our booth. It's over there. Thank you.